Today on YouTube, live in my hand, we have the new Pixii Max. It's Thanksgiving weekend in the USA, and the new Pixii Max, the one with the 36 by 24 millimeter sensor, is just starting to reach stores. I've been testing a Max since October, and I've been shooting with a Pixii since October 2021. So I'm your guy for a guided tour of this latest M-mount digital rangefinder camera from France. Rangefinder cameras are ideal for fast-paced documentary shooting, so to simulate that, I've enlisted two professional ballerinas and a rental studio to give the Max a workout. So let's get started. Pixii introduced its first camera in 2020, and the Max is its fifth generation. One great thing about Pixii is that so far every model has been upgradable when a new model appears. My first Pixii was an A1571, and since then I've upgraded the same camera body to the A2572, the Pixii Plus, and now the Pixii Max. Try that with your Sony Alpha. Another cool thing is that the Pixii is a software-defined camera. Maybe you've heard of software-defined radio, where traditional analog components are replaced by digital signal processing. Pixii aims to do the same thing by replacing proprietary chips and parts with code running on a general-purpose processor. In theory, your camera is never obsolete. You just keep updating it. The current Pixii models, the Plus and the Max, are basically identical, except that the Max has the new larger sensor and a redesigned viewfinder to go with it. If you enjoy using a mix of vintage and modern lenses, and if you want your pictures to have as much of a 35mm film look as possible, the Max is probably the one you'll want. On the other hand, if you just want to make sharp, detailed documentary photos, the Plus is a great choice, and you'll save some money as well. Speaking of money, those prices may have you thinking, yikes, those things are expensive, and yeah, they kind of are. A rangefinder viewfinder module has lots and lots of tiny, very high precision optical mechanical parts, and that stuff is expensive. A rangefinder camera is always going to cost more than a mirrorless camera with similar specs. But the Pixii is actually pretty comparable with the prices of other high-end specialized cameras. Here I put some of the prices on a graph. The Pixii models are the blue bars, and you'll see that they're in the low to middle part of the range. Now I know some of you are going to say, well, yeah, but some of those other cameras will shoot 8K video and 120 frames per second and have AI autofocus mode for fish slips. Well, I don't want any of that. I want a simple, Spartan camera that isn't cluttered up and stays out of my way. Now, if you want to walk into a store and walk out with a new M-mount digital rangefinder camera, your only other choice is the Leica M11, and that's getting onto the far side of $9,000. Plus, you can't use one in public without looking like a Fah-quaad. So there's that. The Max has a sleek, contemporary design. I like to say that Leica M fans revere heritage and craftsmanship, while Pixii buffs appreciate innovation and technology, and the Max looks and feels like high-end tech gear. The body is a two-piece formed metal clamshell with top and bottom plates and controls made of high-grade engineering plastic. The top plate is sparse with a button to release the shutter and a small readout that lets you use the camera as a handheld meter. There's an encoder wheel for selecting shutter speeds and an OLED display that shows all the key settings. On the back, there's a button and another encoder wheel for navigating the menu settings. The M-mount and its release catch are on the front, and on the bottom is a small but much appreciated improvement, a hinged battery door instead of the previous removable part. Changing lenses is like any other M-mount camera. The Pixii doesn't set the finder frame automatically the way a Leica does. You have to use a menu, but here's a tip. Bring up the menu, set your new lens, then half press the release button to get back to the shooting display. The menu will remember where you were, so the next time you change lenses, just press the menu button twice to get back to it. There's still trash talk on some corners of the web claiming you need to use a phone app to use the Pixii, but as we've just seen, you don't. You can run the whole camera off of the top menu. Still, the app does let you change all your settings, which is handy, and it lets you review thumbnails of the pictures you've taken. For a closer look, you can download a high-res thumbnail that's also good enough to post on your social accounts, and if you really want to get hands-on, you can download the full-resolution DNG file and edit it in a RAW-capable app such as Snapseed. The app also has a live view panel. It can be a little glitchy, but it has focus peaking and zoom, and it's good for selfies, taking sneaky pictures, and for doing silly stuff like using this crazy 1950s bellows attachment I found at a camera show. Now that we know our way around the Pixii Max, let's get into our rented studio with ballerinas Erica and Megan. Unfortunately, the studio's floor was too hard and too slick for any really drastic dance moves. Instead, Erica and Megan improvised shapes and coached each other, and I just tried to keep up with the flow. I love a rangefinder camera for this kind of shooting because there are so few controls and so few distractions. It's easy to feel part of the scene and just sense the energy. Looking at the files, I really liked the Max's airy open midtones and natural-looking noise pattern. The DNG files don't need much tweaking but are easy to manipulate if you want, and the camera was very stable and refined. We shot 450 frames in our 90-minute session with no hitches. One thing I unfortunately did relearn the hard way was that just as with previous models, you have to be careful with the Max not to overexpose skin tones or they'll clip. There's an in-finder histogram you can turn on that helps you avoid this, but I forgot to use it. Sorry, Megan. Our shoot also surfaced two other issues that arise because Pixii has chosen not to use a mechanical shutter. It's electronic only. If you shoot mostly in natural light, you'll almost never have any problems with this. But indoors, you have to watch out for a couple of potential gotchas. The first is that there's no flash sync at all. In a dimly lit room, you can use the old open flash technique, set a slow shutter speed, and then fire the flashes manually, and I took this picture that way to prove that it works, but it's just not practical for most shots. What a lot of people will tell you to use instead are photo-safe LED studio lights. These are popular and they're easy to use, but they're way less powerful than even a small flash. That means you're pushed in the direction of using high ISOs and slow shutter speeds, which isn't great for image quality. Megan and Erica are very dynamic people, and LED lighting just isn't fast enough to freeze their movements and expressions the way you can with flash. You'll either need to use a different camera or find a way to get more light onto the scene. Another LED gotcha is that even in studios there may be LEDs that are not photo safe. We ran into that in our rented studio. The lights on the stands were okay, but the overhead lights were flickery. We couldn't keep them out of some of the shots and they caused absolutely ferocious banding. In an unfamiliar setting, you've got to check your shots in the app and watch out. You may need to turn the bad LEDs off. Well, we've come to the end and I still haven't addressed the elephant in the room question. Why are a few photographers willing to pay serious money for a camera like the Pixii Max, a quirky, Spartan, bare-bones camera that makes you do almost all of the work yourself? And you know what? I'm not even going to try to answer that question. Rangefinder cameras are maybe not a cult, but a secret club. And if you don't get the rangefinder aesthetic, maybe you shouldn't join. For people who do get it, the Pixii Max is an interesting and viable new choice in a segment that doesn't have a lot of choices. For that, I'm thankful. Was that too cheesy?